So hello everybody and welcome. My name is Joram Barrez. I'm one of the founders of the Activiti project. More than 4 years ago now. Oh God, it's a long time in IT. And this here is my good friend Josh from Spring. Josh. Yeah.
Hi everybody. I'm the Spring developer advocate at Pivotal. I don't know how many of you have heard of Pivotal or Spring. Okay. Spring is an umbrella name for a group of projects of frameworks that you can use to solve typical sort of enterprise application development concerns, and we happen to offer a very nice integration with Activiti, the subject of which will, which is the subject of today's webinar or discussion or talk.
Your mic seems to be a bit off.
Is it off? Can you hear me?
Well,
is it okay? You can hear me? Okay, good.
It's not very loud now, so you have to speak louder. Anyway, so this is a very, very technical session, so you'll learn a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to assume that most of the people here in the room know something about Activiti, or at least know what a business process is, so I'm going to...
Is that true?
Is that true, actually? Yeah. Yeah, it's true, you know,
Buddha.
see.
Okay, good.
I don't need to go through all the basic stuff like I did for the Spring people. So basically, what is Activiti? Well, in a nutshell, you've got a diagram. It's a very easy one. Typically, they're much, much bigger. Got a diagram. It has human work, people's inboxes. It has system calls, doing whatever calls, as you will see, using Spring Beans and all that. You give that to Activiti. Activiti gives you APIs to manage those processes, start them, see the status, etc. Gives you UIs to do your work and give you insight in how your processes actually are performing. So that was my intro to Activiti. We're open source. We're founded and funded by Alfresco, obviously. Like I said, 4 years ago, it's Apache 2 license. We were a very popular framework. On GitHub, we get a pull request every second day. So, and these are real pull requests in the sense that it's not just fixing documentation or typos. It's really people adding sometimes really cool stuff to it. So, as you can see on the slide there below, we've got currently 74 people contributed to Activiti, which is awesome.
Including me.
Including Josh, yeah, since a long time, 4 years.
Or project.
So we're very proud of the fact that Activiti is very lightweight. Basically, you just have a Maven dependency to Activiti, and there you go. It's a jar in your project, and you're executing processes. We designed it to be very light on resources. We did a test a while ago, and the lowest we could go was like 9 megabytes of RAM for the heap of the JVM, and we could still execute processes. So that's pretty cool. We designed it to scale horizontally. You fire up a couple of nodes of Activiti, and it scales horizontally. Of course, there's no silver bullet in development, so you always have your database at a single point of failure, but there are solutions for that also. Of course, this is an Alfresco summit, so I have to say a bit of words about Alfresco. It's commercially supported by Alfresco since the beginning of this year, 24/7 global support, you know how it goes. We've got a huge partner ecosystem, some very big partners who are in the room, who contribute to Activiti open source tools, which is awesome. We've got an enterprise offering, which you maybe saw yesterday in the session we did yesterday. It's SaaS, it's there. You can try it out now. You should have tried it out yesterday already, activiti.alfresco.com. You register, you get all the stuff I will show you now just for free. You can go ahead and model your stuff and do everything of the cool stuff I'm going to do now. And it's also available on premise. So, time to get to the code. So this is a really tech session. We're going to not show a lot of slides. Business process examples are really hard because they're always company specific. If the business process would be public, then your competitor can steal it. And that's how you could go bankrupt. So we're going to take the easy route, and we're going to take a photo service because that's easier for us and it's more fun. So this is going to be interesting because I'm going to need to speak and draw with my one hand.
You want to trade?
No, it's fine. Well, no, that's just silly. Do you have a Chrome? Yep, here we go. So I'm going to go, wow. Now if you can hold it for 1 minute, I'm sorry. Don't take pictures, please. Shouldn't have said that. So, are you on the Wi-Fi? Yep. So it worked in like 2 minutes ago. Oh, there it is. So I'm going to log in as myself. Here we go. Now you know my password. Okay, so yesterday we used the step editor, so the very simple step editor to show you how easy it was for business people. Now I'm going to use the real BPMN modeler. So we're going to call it the photo process. Yeah, it's the first time I'm here on this computer. So this is the palette of stuff of BPMN constructs you can use. This is the canvas, and every of these constructs has some properties below here. So This is what we call a start event. This is where your process starts. So let's assume that we will have some REST service that Josh will make, and we get some photos in, and we're going to put those photos on something externally, and he will do that. So we're going to assume we've got like a collection of photo objects in. So after the process is started, I'm going to do this. It's an embedded sub-process, and you'll see in a minute why. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a service task. Service task is like a system call. So I'm going to process the photos, and Josh will then show you how it works. But basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to be very lazy, and I'm going to look for the, where is this here? Oh, you have the sliding thing upwards. Yeah, this is very confusing. So since we're in Spring, I can just assume there is like a photo service, and I'm going to do like process photo, and I'm going to assume that there is like a photo object, and that will be fired off to the service. After this transformation thing will go on, I'm going to wait until that service comes back to me. That's called a receive task. And here we go. It's just going to wait until that comes back. Now, the reason why I'm using a multi-instance, why I'm using the embedded one is because I want to use a multi-instance here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, I'm assuming we get a parallel, we're going to do the transformation of photos in parallel. So I'm going to put this stuff on parallel. I'm going to say, look, we're going to have a collection of photos. You will see in a minute that that's probably going to be a JPA thing, if Josh remembers this demo well. And we're going to assume that there will be a photo for every iteration. So what happens here is that this basically means that these little three things below here is that for each of these photos in the collection of photos, you will do a process photo system call and wait for the result to go. Now, the reason why I put it here on the embedded sub-process is because I wanted to put a timer here. Suppose that for some reason that service is down, you can do cool stuff like, say here, PT, that's a standard ISO something 8601 way of saying 10 minutes. You can see do it manually, and then we're going to stop the process. Suppose now that everything goes well, we're going to have a review of the photos. Here we go, and I can assign that to somebody. There is this whole identity store which we showed yesterday where you can assign it to the groups. Remember, if you were in the session, say to the Avengers group to kill the villain. But I'm just going to say, like, there's a group of photo reviewers. I'm going to assume that Josh will make that for me. After review of photos, we're going to go into a decision. Basically, this means like I'm going to decide on something that's going to be inputted in a form here. So I'm going to go up or down depending on that. So let's say if, and we can put a condition here. Let's say if it's not approved, then we go up, and I'm going to switch this to an email task. Basically, I just want to send out an email. I'm not going to bother now with typing all those emails, things you know how an email looks like. And that's pretty much it. So, very simple process, took me, I don't know, 2-3 minutes. Going to save it, going to give it to Josh. Don't worry about those validation errors. Josh has a good version. We only have 40 minutes, so we have to go quick. So what you can do now is, something cool is that this is possibly done by a business guy. We have an activity plugin on Eclipse. What you can do is you can connect to activiti-powered.alfresco.com, pull that thing from the clouds into your local Eclipse. You can work on it, push it back, and you can work everybody on what they can do best. Just to prove that this is real BPMN, I can download it. Here we go. Whoop. Your IntelliJ is not showing it to me. Nope.
It's okay.
It's okay, everybody. And hopefully there's nothing. Yeah. No, your IntelliJ doesn't want to. Trust me on this. This is a real BPMN process, and Josh will show you in a minute how it looks like. So this was my quick things. Was it quick enough, Josh?
Yep. Thank you. So, all right. So that was the high-level overview of the BPMN bits. Now, of course, to take that into an application, you need to have some familiarity with programming. How many of you are Java programmers? Some background? And how many of you, again, have used Spring or seen it in the wild? Okay, so suffice it to say, there's this new hotness called Spring Boot. Yeah, and Spring Boot is a way of accelerating the development process with Spring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to start.spring.io. I'm going to choose the type of application I'd like to build, just Java 1.8. How many of you are using Java 1.8? Go and yell at somebody until you can use it. No, I'm not kidding. It's so much better. They finally unscrewed up the JDK. It's awesome. So group, artifact, name, blah, 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 Maven project. Leave that as is. I'm not going to use Groovy, although I could. I'm going to specify the version I want. And then I'm going to specify the kind of workload I want to support here, right? So the idea is, what we're going to show you today is hopefully going to be a checkbox on this this page here. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to build a JPA application, and I want to build a web app, okay? Hit generate. Open this in the Finder. Okay, and then okay, voila. Open that up, and I'm going to open up a very simple public static void main. This is an otherwise very empty, very boring project. It's just got one application class that looks like this, public static void main. And I can now, without having to think too much, I can now do something with it, right? So I can say, okay, class people, add entity, JPA types, of course. So I'm going to say, I'm going to do something that, because we're short of time and we have very little screen real estate, I'm going to do something that you should never, ever do, not even at home when nobody's looking. I'm going to use public variables. Don't do this at home. People will know. Okay, so basic JPA, right? This is
He's done this before, you can see that.
maybe. Don't ruin the surprise. It's going to work. Nobody expects that at a demo. That's how you get them. Interface, people, repository. So I'm going to build now a way of working with that data based on JPA in this case, although there's similar support for MongoDB, Neo4j, Cassandra, Redis, etc. So basically this is an interface that will be extended and implemented by Spring at runtime, and you'll get an actual implementation of the contract of all the methods that are defined here. It does it based on convention. So I can say find people by first name, pass in a parameter, fn like this, and that translates roughly into a query, more or less like this, right? Select all from people where first name equals, right? So basic JPA, right? And then of course there's other methods here supporting find all, find one, delete, create, read, update, and delete style stuff. I've got a JPA entity here, of course, toString, okay. JPA is the most burdensome part of the code we're going to write here. You can see, look at all this nonsensical stuff I've had to write. Again, remember in a more sophisticated language like Groovy or Scala, again, this could be a one-liner, literally a case class. So it's just Java that gets in the way here. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually set up some data here, like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a bean that gets run when the application is, booted up, pardon the pun. And it's given a callback. It's given a chance to do whatever it wants to do to initialize the state of the application. I'm going to say that this bean of type command line runner depends on the people repository, right? And what I'm doing is I'm using Java 8 lambdas, and that's a feature that lets you substitute an interface with one method here for this syntax that I've just used. So I've got an interface with one method that takes a variable array of strings. That corresponds to public static void main's arguments, right? I can now replace the inline definition, right? I could do this. I could say, I could do that if I wanted. But as all I'm trying to do is communicate that I want this code inside the run method to get run, I can now use this much more convenient syntax in Java 8 that looks like this. This is the same thing to the JDK, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say people repository.save, new, awkward, new person, okay, new person, like so. So what I've got here now is two records in the database, and then I'm going to go through each one in the database. I'm going to print out the records, prove that it's there. And of course, you're looking at this and you're probably wondering, great, Josh, but to what database are you referring? There's nothing here. What are we going to talk to? I'll rely on convention here. I'll go to my Maven dependencies here and add the COM H2 database, the embedded in-memory database. And then based on the presence of that type on the class path, Spring Boot will automatically generate an in-memory embedded database. Notice that otherwise our Maven build is pretty unremarkable. We have a dependency here for web, building JPA-based stuff, and we have a dependency here for web stuff.
You don't even need it right now.
Right. So, and then I'll go ahead and actually build, just to move things along here. Let's see, people, REST controller, just to show off. At REST controller, like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, do terrible things that you should never, ever, ever do, like depend on privately annotated fields. Okay, and I'm going to say I want Spring to provide a reference to this bean by injecting it for us. And then I'm going to say give me a endpoint here for people, and then I'm going to return all the people in the database, all the persons. Whoa, that was not the character I was looking for. Okay. So there you go. We now have, they say an application of sufficient complexity eventually sends email. I posit that in today's day and age, they actually sprout REST APIs. So I've got data access entities. I've got a repository that deals with finding and saving and all that stuff. I've got some initialization logic to insert 2 records and then print out those 2 records. And I've got a REST endpoint. Let's go ahead and run this. Public static void main, after all. I don't have to deploy it to a server if I don't want to. I can. Notice this. This is very important. We have 2 PhDs in our team. And it tickles me to think that they had to spend time building that ASCII artwork. Somebody got a ticket saying we needed good ASCII artwork. If it's not there, it won't ship. It's just not going to work. That's not the ship that we run. So look at that. We've got the records in the database, right, that have been printed out from the command line and everything, in addition to the amazing ASCII artwork. So again, Spring Boot is all about enabling application development very, very quickly, right? So it was and it's, again, a natural fit for something like Activiti, which is also a lightweight embedded process engine. So with that spirit, Joram and I set out upon developing a Spring Boot Activiti integration, right, to simplify app development with Activiti. So revisiting the domain that Joram kicked off, we're going to build a simple photo processing service. How many of you, just by way of show of hands, have oh, come on, you can do this. How many of you, by show of hands, know the Doge? It's okay. You're among friends. Don't be shy. No judging. If you don't know, it's okay. I'm not going to judge you much. Awkward. Well, the Doge is the most important thing to ever happen to the internet, except for Chuck Norris. And basically, he's this really, really cute dog that has become a meme of its own. And the idea is that you can add ridiculous ramblings, exclamations to these photos. And then you get, we call that the Dogeification process. So you add these ridiculous things like, wow, very Twitter, such grump, etc., to the photos, and you get a Spring Doge approved image, right? So we're going to build that. The first thing you need to do that, of course, and to bootstrap our application is actually a process engine. The process engine is Activiti's core API. It's the heart, the beating heart of the application. Spring Boot provides very good support that builds on top of the core Spring support for Activiti, right? So if you look at Spring itself, there's already good support for building a process engine and all that, but you have to do it yourself manually. With Spring Boot, we've done as much as we can by convention. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Maven POM, comment out all but this Spring Boot starter basic, right? I've added this basic dependency to my class path.
It's also good to mention that is on master, GitHub master since yesterday.
Yeah.
So there will be a build test hopefully today.
Yeah.
So by a couple of hours it will be on Maven Central and you can just have that dependency and try that.
Okay, thanks for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just re-enable public static void main just so we can prove the basics, right? So I'll go public static void main, just as like, this is just the same thing as we had before. Our code here is pretty much the same as I showed you just a minute ago when I did that live demo of downloading the zip file and unzipping it and opening it up. But we have a README and some other stuff. But basically, we're starting from 0 here, okay? So Spring application.run, I'm going to say Spring, look at application.class, and look at the annotations on that class, and then do whatever you can to help me. Again, this annotation is where the magic is. This guy here, at enable autoconfig, it should be, I want to go home early, right? That's the annotation. It's help me, Get me the heck out of here, man. I have stuff to do. And so Spring Boot is going to see that, and based on context, based on your class path, based on the objects that you've defined in your Spring context, it's going to do as much as it can for you. In our case, it's going to see that we've already got H2 on the class path. It's going to create an embedded database. It's going to start up, and it's going to find also that we've got the Activiti support on the class path. It's going to automatically deploy the Activiti database schema files for you. If you want, you can disable it, of course, but it's convenient to have that automatically set up for you. And then it's going to discover, by convention, any process definitions, like, for example, the photo process that we've just defined, that are in the source main resources processes folder. Okay, so here's our upload BPMN XML, right? Commented for more readability. And we've already got that. And that was just for this trouble. We've done nothing. We've just added a jar and run the application. Now, again, processes are all about moving data through a system, and it's hard to deny the value of JPA in this particular scenario. So we're going to go ahead and add our Spring Boot support, our Spring Boot activity support for using JPA. What this will do is it'll register custom transaction handling with the process engine. It'll register support. It'll bring in the dependencies you need to be productive with JPA, including the latest and greatest Hibernate implementation, including transaction management support, including the.
So what I did before is that if you only have like the basic jar on your Maven dependency, it will have like a regular data source, a regular Spring data source, transaction manager, and all that. And now while it has JPA on the class, but actually it's smart enough to know, okay, since you want JPA, I'm going to switch it out with a JPA data source, transaction manager, and inject all that stuff into the process engine.
Cool. So
that was a train, right?
Oh, I haven't the foggiest. Reminds me of the L train in Chicago. Let's see.
That's an American joke I don't get, but.
Sorry. Oh, no, it reminds me of the train in Chicago. There's a train that runs all over the place.
Okay, I've got the train in Belgium too.
Yeah, but the ones in Chicago run atop you. So you can be standing there having a cup of coffee. It's like, oh, what's happening? Oh, yeah. Darn it. It's raining L train juice. Okay. Here we are. So all I'm doing is I'm restoring a basic a service. This is our facade around the business process functionality that we want to support here. And it's got a few key methods. What's impressive is not so much the code I've had to write as the code I haven't had to write, right? I'm actually trying to integrate a fairly complex business process. And yet, for all intents and purposes, this is just the sort of normal stuff you'd write in writing a business service anyway. It's a regular Java transactional service tier, right? So if you look at it, we've got a pointer to a task service, which evidently we don't need. We have a injected reference to a file system directory. So I'm going to look here, system properties, my user directory /desktop/uploads. It's going to look for any folders, any files in there, right? It's going to write files there as well. This is the activity runtime service, and it's available already. This is our photo repository, the JPA thing we just looked at. And we have a method here that gets called whenever this bean gets constructed. And in that method, we simply reference this directory and then make sure it exists if it doesn't already exist. So it's just basic sanity, state management. And then for our public interface, for our public contract, we have a method to read a photo into, given a photo object, a JPA entity stored in the database, read in the bytes from the file system. Again, it's going to read from that upload directory, find the photo by a given photo ID, and then read that in.
It's worth to point out that if we wouldn't have used this input stream, if you would have a regular JPA entity, not with an input stream, you wouldn't need all of that code because it would all be given to you by the JPA repository that you extend from in Spring. Now we have to write all this CRUD because we have a specific thing for the input stream.
Yeah, we're just moving bytes off the file system. This isn't a database problem. It's a moving photos around kind of problem. So creating a photo, again, same idea, given a user ID and bytes for the data of the image. We're going to create a new JPA entity to be a surrogate to that or a proxy to it. We're going to save it by its user ID, and then write the bytes for the photo to the file system, again, referring to that other directory there. We have another method here called launch photo process, wherein we can pass in an array or collection of photo JPA entities. And again, this is going to be just standard activity stuff. It's going to start a process and then pass in variables. And the variables in this case are this collection. This collection, normally, if you pass in a complex object into the activity engine, absent the JPA support, it tries to serialize the object into the database, the backing database.
Which is not a good idea.
Not a good idea. For primitives, sure, have at it. Use your strings and your dates and your longs, just all you want. But for JPA, there's a bit of finesse, a bit of smarts in place. It'll actually look at the entities and implement the claim check pattern. It'll persist the IDs into the database, but not the actual entities, and then it'll rehydrate them whenever you pull them out of the process definition in subsequent steps. Okay, so you don't have to worry about passing in a whole collection of photos. If this has 3 elements, then all you're saving is 3 IDs, 3 strings, 3 whatever primary keys.
And also in the expressions, I didn't go through it in the demo which I did, but if you can open up the upload XML, you can see that you can basically with expressions. Where is it? Somewhere.
Up here.
Yes. Where is it? That is the awkward scrolling, right? I don't know why people actually like that.
Complain.
Yeah, they call it natural, but
Apple. They're going to be big one day, you guys. You mark my words. Those Apple guys, they're going to be onto something.
So I was looking for the here it is. So it's commented out because of stuff we're going to show later on. But basically, so remember that I put this photo object, which is now a JPA object, but I put that in the multi-instance expression, right? You can do
For each photo in photos.
Indeed. So we can use a photo in the expression we do in the service task in the system call. And since it's JPA, you can do stuff like photo URL or name or whatever. So this stuff just works in Activity. So you can, even though it's a JPA thing, like Josh said, it will automatically use a session manager to fetch your photo object or JPA object when it's not there and do the stuff you expect. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm biased, of course.
Yeah. Right. So that's basics, right? I'm going to go ahead and comment out some code here so that we can move on. Did I omit anything? No, I didn't. I think this is
No,
this is a basic
fine,
service,
it's fine,
right?
yeah.
We have here this is the critical piece. Given the photo JPA entity, which of course is a proxy for some bytes stored in the file system, pass the photo into our photo manipulator, which is another library that I've imported. I won't bore you with the other boring details about it, but it's just basic Java image buffer, image manipulation. All I'm doing is writing the text onto the JPEGs. It has nothing to do with anything. It's not important. So all we're doing is we're saying, give me the bytes for an image that you want to manipulate and pass it in as a photo type, and then give me the returned changed bytes. And then we write those changed bytes out to the file system. So we take in a photo, make some changes, and then write the bytes out and overwrite the existing one. That is basically our service, and it is, again, a wrapper around some complex business functionality. What we're going to do now is actually tie in that functionality to our workflow definition. We saw already a service method for starting the process, but we're not going to build sort of a working application around that. Now, let's see. We have everything we have here. Process engine, human tasks. So the first things first. This is a fairly complex application. Again, if you create a business process in the forest and nobody activates it, did you actually create it? No, of course not. That's existential, philosophy 101. So basically, we're going to create a REST API here so that people can actually talk to our business process and actually use it. This REST API, again, fairly boring, I would hope. It's simply a REST endpoint that takes, as its parameters, as its input, it takes multi-part file definitions.
Yeah, that took us a while to figure out.
Let's see, what am I doing here?
So you need the web, probably, web support.
Right.
So you see, we only have now support for the basics, which is just data source, Spring, and Activity. We added the JPA to add JPA support, but now to actually have a REST thing, he needs to add those, the web jar. So we now have 3 jars, which we added, which is pretty neat, I think.
Yeah, that's, okay, so paste. I'm going to go here and add REST API, okay. And that will import transitively the annotations I need to work with building a REST API. In the code itself, again, very unremarkable. At least I'd like to think so. That's precisely the value here, right? It's nothing new to make this all work inside of a normal application. Let's see.
So what he's doing here is he's creating just REST endpoints to get an image. He's creating an endpoint to get the approve. So you remember that after the multi-instance embedded thing I had, that after the photos were done, you would go into a review task. So he's going to set up an endpoint to actually fetch those tasks, and later on he's going to use that to, in the UI, basically have like a little task inbox where you can click through and say yes or no, I'd like these photos.
So okay, here we go. So we've got one endpoint here to receive file uploads, multiple files, right? You can upload multiple files. They get sent into the business process. We're just doing a lot of basic multi-part file handling. We're going to say, okay, given a request with multi-part file uploads, if the data is there, create an array list, collapse all the multi-part files into one collection, because what you get normally is a map with keys and values, and the values are collections of multi-part files. So instead of having a map with one key and one value and another key and one value, I'd rather have one array, one collection with 2 values, right?
I couldn't follow that.
Well, okay. So that's what we're doing here, is just collecting it and flattening it. I'm going to go ahead and iterate through the files in the collection, aggregate them up, and then I'm going to pass them to the photo service. It's going to take the currently authenticated principal, which we'll go ahead and comment out for now, for the sake of understanding what's happening here. And I'm going to just substitute this guy, okay, for now. So Josh is creating these photos. And then we're going to, take these photos and then pass them into the photo service launch photo process. And we're going to get the process instance back. The process instance represents the runtime state of a launched process definition, right? So we can use that to track and ask questions about the flow of that process. We can say, how far along are you? Have you finished? Are we there yet? Is it soup? There's also an endpoint here to read the bytes from a photo. So I can say, okay, give me an image, and then read the bytes from the input stream, and then render that back in the browser, right? So this is basic reader kind of functionality. And there's another endpoint here to submit the approval or non-approval of certain images, right? And then yet another one here to render the page with images to be approved. So this one basically looks in the task service, finds all the images that have been processed, and then remember in that workflow definition, it joins back, it converges back at the end for a review task that somebody in the photo reviewers group will have to follow up on, right? So we're going to take all the outstanding tasks for anybody in that group, and again, it can be 10 users, it can be 1 user, just anybody with that role. And then I'm going to say, show them a page where they have the current task as well as the current photos. Again, we're going to get the variable out of the database here, and this will be the JPA collection that we've looked at. And we're going to render it in a page. Okay, so that should be enough for now. Let's go ahead and see what we have. Good ASCII artwork, hallmark of a good application. I don't know if you've ever tried. How many of you? Oh, awkward. How many of you, by show of hands, have ever met or know somebody who knows, or ever worked with anybody else who knows PHP, or maybe you know somebody who accidentally tripped and fell and hit somebody who knew Ruby on Rails? These languages are.
I did a year of Ruby on Rails.
Oh, it's a thing, I'm told. So I have neglected to add a critical bean here. Beans. The library that we use to actually manipulate the images, you have to define that somewhere. Spring can't just guess, right? You have to actually provide the reference to it. So I'm going to define it here in this factory method. And I'm just going to say, here are some various combinations of random text to add to the image, right? So I'm going to go ahead and restart this. Take a sip of water. Here we go. Ah, so watery. More watery than those other waters. So I can now go to, I suppose I can go to the command line. That's what I can do. If I go to the actual application itself, localhost 8080 / like that, I'll get nothing. There's an upload endpoint, right? That's where I want to submit to it. So what I'm going to do is add. I'm going to go hit the advanced REST client. I'm going to say, hit that endpoint for me, post. I'm going to send files, like so. It's going to be called file, right? And I'm going to choose a file here, like so. Doge, misc.
Just for your information, this part is also new for me. That's good, Josh. It's just live demoing.
Yeah. We have a critical problem here. Again, for this to be a representative example of something you might do in the enterprise, in the field, we need good demo images. So of course we need the Doge himself. Oh, look at that guy. It's ridiculous. How can the internet survive with this thing on the internet? So we'll have that guy right here, Doge. Here we are. We all know that for any good demos you need the Hoff. So I'm going to bring in David Hasselhoff. Oh, it's so good. It's just so good.
The fifth one, please.
He makes every demo better, just by default. Absolutely. The Hoff. Okay, so now we have that. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to choose a file. The Hoff, of course. And I'll add a new field. Maybe the Doge. Or how about the Doge? Why not? I'm going to hit send and get sadness. Did I forget to specify the content type? I think I did. Multi-part file. And then what was the error here?
Should be file 0 and file 1. Maximum permitted size. You took a too big picture of the Hoff.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing. I'll thank you to remember that. So, fine. Let's just do this the hard way. Desktop, CD, CD Doge, CD Spring Doge, mate. Okay. Where is my file here? Hello. Demo, source. No,
You're looking for templates now.
I'm looking for my file upload command.
Oh.
Oh, it's probably in here, I
Yeah.
suspect. No. GitHub.com.
As it will now prove, there is all that code that we're writing now, and even more is online on my account actually. Spring Boot webinar.
Keep going. Test. Did I not? Guys, the perils of not documenting your code are obvious here. History. Come on, grep, curl. Good. So curl minus F. File equals at users JLong desktop. And then we're going to go to the desktop here. It's going to be doge.jpg or doge. We're going to go do the hof underscore jpg. And then we're going to say HTTP localhost 127.0.0.1 8080 upload like so. And why is that so?
Because it's too big.
The Doge is too big?
Yeah, it seems to.
No, the hof is too big. There should be a hof not found exception or something, you know? Okay, voila. So that was the server gave us back an error when I tried to upload the picture.
Yeah, that's logical, right? So because you saw that in the process, so it says that unknown property used in delegate, of course, because he was already. So if you go back to your process and you uncomment that
Yep, so
service task.
Brings us to the next point, which is that you can actually call out to different systems from a workflow process. One particularly nice benefit of this is that you can actually now integrate with other systems. So we actually provide a project called Spring Integration, which is all about enterprise application integration. How many of you have had the dubious pleasure of using something like Tibco or Web Methods or Axway Integrator? I give away hugs, open source hugs. Show me on the doll where Tibco touched you. Show me on the doll. I am not a fan. And the reason is because you can do the very, very large majority of what these products do without the $1 million consultants. Using open source bits, right? So we have a project called Spring Integration. It's a messaging-based approach to integration.
And so we have in Activity now a Spring integration,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this support. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say whenever the process hits that first task, which is to actually modify the photo, forward control into the integration engine, let something happen. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and modify the photo and then send a reply message back. But I could, as easily, send it to RabbitMQ or ActiveMQ or whatever, a broker of some sort. I could call it Apache Kafka or MQTT or, yeah, you wish, or anything, right? And so I have that support now. So I'm going to go ahead and restore some integration code here. These are the three things we need. We need an inbound gateway, which is to say that Spring Integration is going to look for messages coming from Activity, and it's going to treat them as inbound messages, inbound requests. And when Spring Integration sees a request, it's going to trigger a flow, and that flow is what we've defined right here. We're saying whenever a message comes in from the inbound gateway here, right, from the inbound gateway, then launch this callback, this generic message handler. And this message handler is just going to take the photo. Remember, this is inside the for each loop. So we're going to say get the current photo, pass it to the Dojify photo thingy, and then send back a reply with a header that says, yes, this has been processed. Again, you can string together a far more complex flow. I could send it out over RabbitMQ, have an aggressive consumer pattern in the cluster, pull down the images, and then, as capacity provides, modify the photos and then send a reply message back asynchronously, right? This doesn't have to. It doesn't sit there in a transaction blocking if you don't want
Yeah, and also if you would drop the Spring Boot JTA support, the jar just in the main dependency, actually the activity stuff will then use a JTA data source. And in the case, as Josh was saying, you use a JMS, something to send JMS messages, if that's part of the same JTA transaction by nature because you had the JTA dependency on your class path. Actually, when you do it in the process, it actually be involved in that, how do you call it, JTA transaction, right? So you would go,
Be enlisted.
yeah, it just works brilliantly. But normally you have to, I did that before, you had to write a lot of configuration. And
Right. So here we go. We're going to upload the image. And again, this time we don't get an error. We can actually see on the command line here that the flow has entered this block, and it says integration, handling, execution. And it prints out the headers, right, handling, execution. And then we say it's handling photo number 1, handling photo number 2.
I know.
We run the application, and then the result is sent back to the service, which then has permission to forward to the next state, which, as we know, is now, assuming all photos have been Dojified, there's now a review state. And so the question is, well, how do we tie in the review, right? The review is specifically for people, for users in a certain group, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add the last bit of functionality here. I'm going to go ahead and add our, let's see, this actually goes inside of the application. Yep. I'm going to add here the Spring Boot activity support for security, right? And the security support basically ties into Spring Security, which is our security framework. It's the most widely used security framework in the JVM right now. It integrates with everything and then some: Active Directory, Kerberos, PAM, LDAP, OAuth, anything you can imagine wanting to talk to get your users and all that stuff, you can. And what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, integrate with the identity service that Activity provides. The identity service knows about groups and their roles, right? So when I say I want to forward all definitions, all processing to the users in the reviewers group, photo reviewers group, what I'm actually saying is, forward all control to any user that we've defined here that's talking to the identity service. And then with our integration here, the Spring Security infrastructure can see the identity service. You can see that we've got two groups. A user, Joram is both a uploader and an approver, whereas I am just an uploader. And then you can see we've got basic code here to simplify creating the users and the groups. Again, you can do this however you want. However you teach the identity service about your users and so on, that's up to you, but simple demo data. Okay. Remind me. Okay.
You got like -4 minutes or something.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's almost there.
We've created a security configuration. What we're saying is anybody can go to the / endpoint and upload photos in the web app, and we'll see that now. But only certain people, those who have the photo reviewers group role, can go to the approval page, right? So these are the same photo reviewers that we defined in the business process and that we expect from the workflow engine. I'm going to go ahead and restart the application, like so. Do I have anything fancy in there? Goodbye. Nope, I think we did it. So we're going to go ahead and restart here. Oops, nope, I failed. I failed you guys, and I didn't mean to. You go down to, I'm going to go ahead and restore the security principal. Remember earlier we saw that there's a security principal that's being used here to figure out who's launching the process. I'm going to go ahead and restore that bit here.
You need a comma, yeah.
Thank you, kind person. And then where's JLong?
JLong there, digit below, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say principal.getName, and that'll be JLong or JBarrez or whatever, right? So here we go. Launch, up and away. Okay, voila. Application's up and running. We can now go to this endpoint, and it's going to prompt me to log in. I'll log in because now I've got Spring Security on the class path. I've turned on HTTP Basic, up here. You can see that I've registered the, where did I put this? Security control. I said turn on HTTP Basic support, and then for now turn off cross-site request forgery protection, right? Just because it's simpler to develop a demo that way. But you should never do that, nor should you use public variables. So okay, here we go. JLong, and the password, don't tell anybody, please, may or may not be password. Okay, PASWRD. So voila, nothing there. Why not?
Because you didn't define the view.
View MVC.
Yeah.
There it is.
Oh.
/ Did I include the
Templates, yeah.
upload? Well, that's a little discerning. Error. What's Spring Integration saying? Page not found. Awkward.
So we did a webinar on Tuesday, 6 o'clock in the morning. It was painful. We did a webinar which we had more time than this. I think we got like 1 hour and 10 minutes. Where it actually works, so this is the very same code. But yeah, by probably cosmic radiation or something.
Oh, do we have the right types to the class path? Actuator.
Maybe you need time leaf. Did you have time
Oh,
leaf?
thank you. There
Yeah.
you go. So I'm going to go ahead and add all this stuff.
So time leaf is like a templating engine, like FreeMark or whatever, to template your HTML.
There we are. Thank you. Good call for this time leaf. I needed the templating library on the class path. I now have my super duper modern HTML3 support here, and we decided the Doge was acceptable to our service gods. Good. So I'll upload this guy, and then for
No, the half will be too big, right?
yeah, so we'll do the Doge again. Hit submit, and then you can see it has basically refreshed the page, confirmed that we've already entered the integration code that we had before, and now, as a separate user, for example, as Joram, I'm going to log into the application, go to localhost. Whoops, skipped ahead by accident. I'm going to log in, hit JBARREZ,
It's a hard name, I know. I have
password.
to write it my whole life.
Right. So now I'm logged in again as this. I can go to the upload page, but I can also go to the approve endpoint, right? So you can see we've Dogefied our Doge. It says, wow, very pivotal, such Java, so semicolon free, etc. So I can say, yes, absolutely, I do approve. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can see the flow if there's anything here, just in case. I'm not sure if there is, but just in case. Hit true. So we're done. We've already approved that photo, and the flow has continued to the end of the process. And again, I can keep doing this, and ad infinitum, I can say, okay, well, add another Doge, do it again, hit submit, refresh, and I get now very workflow, such BPM, so activity, etc. Right, so a simple application tied together with a web endpoint, tied together with a messaging system. Because we're trying to make this production ready, we know that business process management is all about insight into how far your processes have gone. We include in Spring Boot lots of support for production readiness. So for example, by default, if you go to /metrics, having included, by the way, this actuator jar on the class path, if you go to /metrics, you get a dump of all the requests that have been made, how much memory you have, etc. You can go to env to get all the information about your environment. And then more saliently, you can go to the activity endpoint here, which is custom. This is what we've contributed here. And it'll tell you how many process definitions and process instances have been run, how many outstanding tasks you have. You can tie this into your routing and monitoring machinery. If this gets too high, somebody's pager should go off, right? This is instrumentation. And then, of course, for convenience, we'll, what is it, upload? It's called photo process, after all. So I can go to the activity /processes /process name, and I get a automatically generated rendering of the process definition. Good for the pointy-haired bosses, right? And manager types. So again,
this was auto-layouted, by the way, so it doesn't look like the one that I did because Josh removed he doesn't like XML, so he removed all the diagram information, right. And then the auto-layouter of Activity kicks in to auto-layout, or tries to try to do a good job as possible. So
I didn't mention that there's actually a full REST API that's also exposed when I included the Spring Boot Starter REST API. That's the Activity Process Definition API. So again, in tandem with Spring Security, I could take the workflow engine, REST API, secure it with OAuth, and then consume it, for example, from a mobile device, from JavaScript, from whatever, right? Spring Security OAuth. This makes it so you can actually orchestrate JavaScript clients, phone apps, tablets, business processes running in the back office, anything you want through this now central hub. And it's very easy to build this stuff together. The next steps for this project are, of course, to get a guide on Spring.io. We're gonna, the code is now in GitHub on /activity and master. If you'd like to try the bits out, we'd cherish your feedback and your hate mail, good, bad, or otherwise. Please don't hesitate.
Is the presentation going to be on the link on the summit's listed?
Should
I sure
be.
hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I flailed up here for a couple of reasons, one of which is to get that video online, so hopefully. So with that, my friends, we've come to an end. We're out of Doge.
And we're out of time.
Questions, thoughts, feedbacks, tomatoes. Where do you guys even get tomatoes? Who brings tomatoes to a tech conference? What's that about? I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. A little bitter. Anyway, questions? Anything? Oh, come on. I was here and I have questions. What does it all mean? Yeah, sir.
If I understand well.
And by the way, thank you, everybody else. Thank you so much. Sorry for the delay.
Thank you.
Cheers.
If I understand well, it's exactly the same approach as Spring integration, as you're building your process process.
Yeah.
And you're executing it inside your Spring application.
Yeah.
Activity is not the executor.
Right.
It is running inside the Spring app.
Which is exactly the same as it used in Alfresco, for example. In Alfresco 2, activity is just a Spring bean in the whole of Alfresco Spring configuration.
And then we can call out to the Java
Yeah.
code. With Spring integration, we can not only call out to Java code, but we can call out to other systems, right? So we can send a web service call. We can send a message over a broker or whatever, right? So-
That's one way of integrating activity, but you can also, if you like to have like a server, activity server, you can set it up in that way that it's like, we call it standalone, where basically you got the REST API being the entry point, and then have like Spring call that. That's another option, right? So you can embed it, which is one of the core strengths of activity, or you can run it standalone, whatever you fancy.
And so if you embed it, you will be able to add forms that
Yes.
call the Spring service that you-
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like we've done here, actually.
Which is really powerful. Yeah. Yeah.
We had a file upload form that was talking to logic that talked to the embedded
Yeah.
process engine.
Indeed.
Any other questions, my friends? All right, thank you so much. And if you have questions, feel free to take them up here.
We need 50 minutes,
Yeah.
which at least.